Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Living Solo, Living Well, and I'm Kat, and I am 64 years old. I will be 65 at the end of the year, and I live solo. I'm a registered nurse, and today's topic is something I wanted to talk about for a long time, and the timing just wasn't right, but as a lot of you know, I was injured at a job that I had 4 years ago, and I had a backwards fall. I sustained a brain injury, which the way my head hit, I damaged the muscle to my neck, the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the SCM, and I also had injuries to my thoracic spine because I fell backwards. And because of the way I fell and the brain injury, I also have some vision problems, hence the prism glasses. I did a video on the prism glasses, that they're not as dorky as you thought they'd be, or as I thought they'd be, and we've come a long way. But anyway, I wanted to talk about what to do when you're injured on the job, because I've dealt with workers' comp for 4 years. It's over 4 years. The 30th of April was 4 years. And it has been a long road and a struggle, not to mention recovering from a brain injury and from physical injuries, having to deal with workers' comp. I was also, while I was on light duty for 6 months after the injuries, I was terminated wrongfully. And that's another video. I think I might have done a video on it where I talked about it, but it was a wrongful termination, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So anyway, but because of both of those cases, that case lasted a year, and the workers' comp has still been going on for 4 years. So I had so many different injuries to so many different systems, neurological, mostly neurological, but physical, my spine, my neck, my right ear, my vision, my brain. And so for the longest time, well, let me back up a little bit. This is to help guide you through what to do, or where to go, what to do, how to maneuver being an injured worker, especially injuries that were substantial, not like, you scratched yourself or you have a bruise now from a fall, but something substantial like a broken bone or multiple injuries. And I had to navigate this all by myself. I did find videos initially, starting the day after I fell. I was home for the rest of that weekend. This was a Saturday morning. I usually worked Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays every week, and as a nurse. And I fell on a Saturday morning, so I was off work. They allowed me to be off work the rest of that Saturday and all of that Sunday. However, when I went to the first doctor, who was a doctor I had to pick from a panel that workers' comp provided, the one I picked, he made me go back to work. I had to go back to work the following weekend, and if I didn't, I would not be paid, but I didn't have that time off that I needed. And looking back, even at that time, I knew why. And I get the itches whenever I start a video. So there you go. At the time, he had originally, at that doctor visit, said, I had asked him if I could be off that following weekend, so an entire week later, because I had so many issues. I was in extreme pain. I had nausea, vomiting, vertigo was like crazy. I couldn't walk a straight line. I had speech issues. I couldn't follow a train of thought. I couldn't remember what I had just said and where I was going with it. Not your typical aging forgetfulness, but these were more severe things where friends were commenting. Coworkers were saying that wasn't me. That's not you. You're different. It's like the train leaves the track and derails during a conversation. And I thought I was hiding it well, I noticed it about myself, but I just kind of tried to cover it up because I didn't know if that was something substantial or was it my imagination, because I had so many injuries and I was told by these doctors, pretty much that, well, people heal within 3 to 6 months and it's already been 8 months for you, 12 months for you. I can't help that. I am doing I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And being the typical workers' comp, they minimize everything. And so they were trying to, all this time, tell me that everything was fine. And that's what made me have these second thoughts like, am I imagining this? All these different things, like, is my speech really messed up? But words would come out that didn't make sense. And I remember one day when I was on light duty, working in a small little nursing office, one of the CNAs, there were several in there, and one of the CNAs was saying something to me, and I just stared at her because I couldn't understand what she was saying. It's like it came through jumbled, and I don't know what she said. I just sat there, smiled, and stared at her. And things like that, it makes you second guess yourself. You're wondering, is there something wrong, or am I really okay and I'm just not seeing it? So what I did, because I had the foresight to think something may come of all of this, so I better write things down. Part of that reason was because of my memory. My memory was not that great after I fell. It was great. I did multitasking very well prior to that as a nurse, and even not as a nurse. But I was having difficulty, and so I wanted to write things down to make sure I remembered. And the things I wanted to write down were how I was being treated at work. Because the day that I came back, so that following weekend, I had to go back on Friday morning, and it was blatantly obvious that I was treated differently. I was ignored by our administrator, who came up to speak to the nurse sitting next to me at the desk on another unit. And normally he would chit chat with me, hey Kat, how's it going? How you doing? He was, humorous as well, but he spoke only to the nurse next to me. He did not even make eye contact with me. He didn't address me. He did not acknowledge that I was there. We were literally sitting like she was right here. We were this far apart. And I was looking right at him, but he made no eye contact with me. So I knew, I was kind of confused because I thought, what? I fell. I didn't do anything. It wasn't like I was a bad employee. And so I had a really hard time understanding why I was being treated differently. So it ended up that day that I could not finish out the day. I was there from 7 a.m. until noon when I just couldn't do it, and I had to speak to the director. She did walk by and said, "Oh, are you feeling better?" And I said, "No." And I named some of the symptoms. And then I said, "I can't work. I am so sick at my stomach, and I'm in a lot of pain, and my head was hurting, and just so many things." And she made the snarky comment that, "Well, you're not going to get paid if you go home." And I said, "That's fine." I mean, it was legitimate because I was on light duty sitting at a desk answering phones for my regular nursing pay. That is such an easy job for good pay. Why wouldn't I want to stay? If I wasn't as bad off as I was, I would have stayed. That was an easy thing to do for good pay. But I couldn't do it. I could not. I was hurting so bad. I mean, there were so many things going on. And so I did get approval to leave, but I didn't get paid. And I knew I wasn't. I could not do it. So that was a Friday, so I took the rest of that weekend off with no pay. And so my thinking about why they ordered me to go back that weekend was because if I'd have been able to stay home to recover, it was at a cutoff point for receiving benefits. So I think it was like if you're out 7 days after the injuries, then workers' comp would have to pay you benefits daily. And I was told by the first doctor I saw, and I believe I was his very first work comp patient, because he knew nothing. He'd have to leave the room, go talk to his doctor preceptor. He was a nurse practitioner. And he'd come back in with information. Then he'd go back out again to talk to his preceptor. So I knew he was new at this. And he originally had said, when I asked if I could be off that next weekend, he said, sure. But then when he went out, talked to the guy, came back, he said, I've got some news you're not going to like. And he said, you have to go back to work next weekend. So I know when he spoke to the doctor that that was the reason why. I had done research after I fell because I was home. I was watching YouTube, a lot of YouTube videos on workers' comp, which I highly suggest if you've been injured that you do that. You find some good reputable videos on people who've been injured on the job, or attorneys who work for employees who have been injured. Not a work comp attorney that tells you how work comp works and they're for the employer. Look for videos that benefit the employee, because I also heard way back in 2014, I heard that back in 2014 or some year like that, the laws were changed to benefit employers as opposed to employees. So that really stung to hear that, because to me that says it's all about the money. It's all about what can workers' comp do to save money on a claim. And so they tried every shenanigan in the book. And so when I would go see, I went to see an orthopedic surgeon, not for surgery, but to be evaluated. And he was one of their doctors on their panel. So I chose him because he was downtown in Nashville, and I live about an hour away. And so I'd heard a lot of good stuff about this company. My daughter had broken her hand many years ago in high school, and so she had seen a doctor there. So, you're just like, well, I'm familiar with it. Let's just go there. I'll pick him. So they give you a panel of 3 providers that you can choose from, who's going to be your doctor. So this doctor ended up being my primary treating physician. So from that point, he would refer me to, if I needed PT, ST, OT, whatever therapy I needed, he was the one to make that decision and to make that referral. So I couldn't just go to a physical therapist or a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. I had to go to this guy. He had to refer me out, and in order for workers' comp to approve it and to pay for it. So I kept asking for physical therapy, and I was in such pain. My neck I had headaches every day. My spine hurt every day. Right now, there's a debate about there being a fracture there. And what's obviously visible as one or more fractures on the thoracic spinous processes in the mid-thoracic area, they're saying it's artifact, and that I'm just focused on that. And that is not the case. For workers' comp, you need to have a record of all the injuries as a result of the accident, because if you bring it up later, let's say I said, oh, my back is fine, but everything else, and later I say my back is hurting, well, I didn't bring it up. I didn't say there was any issue with it. So it's a difficult thing to get that included with your injuries, from what I hear. And so I named everything that was hurting at the time. I even had a mild groin pull from the act of slipping on the wet floor and going backwards. And so I even mentioned that. It wasn't bad, but I mentioned it because I noticed, I could feel it faintly, and I knew that had to have been from when I slipped. I don't have a memory of entering this patient's room and slipping, but I remember going towards the door, and then once I'm inside, I have the memory of going backwards and everything going out of my hands, medications, what have you. And then I hit the thoracic spine, and then I hit right here, top left back, which means I threw my head back and over to hit here, which sent the force this way, which damaged my neck muscle. So back to the day that I fell, I had a concussion. I had a lot of symptoms. And that next day, this was a Sunday now. The day after I fell was a Sunday. So my neck swelled humongous on this side. So I was worried about a blood clot. Being a nurse, all kinds of things went through my brain and my injured brain. And so I went to the ER because I was in a lot of pain and it swelled, and I just didn't want there to be a blood clot. So when I got there, they did whatever they did testing wise, and there was no blood clot. It was just an injury from the fall. But they wouldn't say specifically a specific type of injury. So anyway, as time goes on, I started having high-pitched ringing in my ears, tinnitus, and that happened on the Wednesday after I fell on the Saturday. All of a sudden, there it was, as loud as a concert in my ears, in my head. And I still have it. I've had it for 4 years. And you tend to tune it out a little bit, but it's been so loud the last week. I don't know why. Sometimes it's more intense, and it kind of varies in the frequency. And sometimes it's higher, sometimes it vacillates, it goes back and forth, and it's both ears. But I really hear it right here. But it's both ears. And so, anyway, after seeing this orthopedic surgeon, I worked on a med cart on a unit at a nursing home where I fell. And this med cart, if any of you are nurses and you know what I'm talking about, or maybe you've seen it if you're a non-nurse and you've been to a facility, it is huge, it's heavy, it's a big cart with heavy drawers with tons of medications in them. And I was injured over here, so this whole side, all the way down my arm, my arm was so just messed up that I asked for restrictions, so I did not have to push this med cart down the hall, and I did not have to open the drawers because I'm right-handed. This is the side that's damaged, my right side. And I knew, as a nurse, when you're working the med cart, you are opening any given drawer. Let me back up. If you have, which I did, 30 patients, and 30 patients, each one gets, let's say they get medication at each med pass during the day. There are many med passes, but let's just say there's 4, just to be on the safe side. So 4 med passes times 30 patients, it's 120 times of opening the drawer, because you open it, get a patient's meds, close it, go give them to the patient. So having at least 120 times of opening these big heavy drawers, plus PRN meds, which were random as needed meds. If they were hurting and they needed a pain pill or they needed something for nausea, you're opening that drawer again. I hurt so bad, I had asked if he could take me off the med cart because I could not. I knew I just didn't have the strength and the energy, and I had a lot of pain where I couldn't do that. So his comment was, "You open drawers at home, don't you?" This was the orthopedic surgeon. The smart ass comment, I'm sorry, the smart comment where he said, "You open drawers at home, don't you?" And it shocked me. And so I still was injured. My brain was messed up. My thinking was messed up. I was surprised he even said that. So the next time I went back to him, I just let it out. And I said, "I don't appreciate the way you spoke to me, saying that, well, you open drawers at home, don't you?" And my drawers at home are not heavy drawers like that. I could probably use a finger and pull the drawer open. If I didn't have to open it, I wouldn't. So it's not the same thing. And I just told him I didn't appreciate that. And he made some snarky comment like, "I'm sorry that hurt your feelings," or something like that. But the fact that they didn't take me seriously, because if they did, they'd have to put that in their notes, and that would go to workers' comp, and that would cost workers' comp more money. So any injury, if there's acknowledgement of an injury, then you have to acknowledge that there might be therapy or some kind of treatment needed for it. So it's just best if they keep their mouth shut and say, you're fine. So this went on and on. So he referred me to a neurologist because I had nerve pain deep inside, burning. If you took a hot poker and stuck it in my right ear all the way in, the burning sensation, the nerve pain was intense. And so I had the swollen neck. I had a little puffiness right here. I had damage to the ear. My vision was off. I mean, it ended up that it affected several things with regard to my vision. I have a paralyzed cranial nerve. So when I move my eyes outward to each side, like a field sobriety test on the side of the road, if you're drunk, I can't get my eyes all the way over to either side. And that's significant, or signifies a sixth cranial nerve palsy. I also have, this eye looks inward more than this eye, and so that causes depth perception issues. It also makes me nauseous, and it's hard to read because I see double vision. I see shadows below numbers and letters or faces, and so it makes it hard to see sometimes. It makes it very difficult to focus on things. So I kept telling them that, and nobody cared. They didn't do anything about it. So meanwhile, I'll jump back for a minute. The journaling and writing things down, the day after I fell, I started recording everything that I could recall. And I started also recording, once I went back to work that following week, I started recording everything that went on during the day, how they treated me, what someone said, or, if it was some kind of smart comment, because there were many as time went on, such as, you only bumped your head. No, I hit very hard. And to damage this muscle is not an easy task. So if this muscle gets damaged, it's very rare, then you must have done something very traumatic. You must have had a traumatic fall, accident, or injury of some sort. So I eventually was referred to a neurologist, and the neurologist, every time I'd mention the nerve pain in the ear or the neck, he finally said, if I were treating you for anything but headaches, I could address these things. So it turns out that workers' comp only sent me to him for headaches, nothing neuro, no vision, no neurological issues with the vision because that's related to the brain injury, and no ear nerve issues, nothing. So he actually said, if I were treating you for anything other than workers' comp for headaches, I could address that, but they only sent you to me for headaches. And I was blown away. It's like these doctors that say they're taking care of patients, or they take an oath to do no harm and take care of patients, totally won't address things because workers' comp did not tell them to. And what I found out since, maybe at that time I kind of started to find this out, but they will say there's nothing wrong because if they diagnose you with something that ends up costing workers' comp a lot of money to take care of, whether it's a settlement or medical treatment or therapy, whatever, then they get looked upon like they're costly to workers' comp. So they may not get sent those patients like they normally get sent, those workers' comp patients. So it's kind of like a little group, a little club, if you will, that they do things a certain way. It doesn't matter if the employee is injured, they don't care. They only care about saving money for workers' comp. So this neurologist, when he said that, it opened my eyes to what they can do, what they are allowed to do by law, and to our detriment, to an injured employee's detriment. So eventually this doctor ordered some therapy. The other doctor, the ortho, ordered therapy. This doctor ordered some different therapy, like vestibular therapy, because my balance, I could not walk a straight line. I had so much vertigo, I could lean down and I'd fall, or I could turn around and I'd lose my balance. I've had coworkers when I went back to work, and I'd be standing there talking to them, and I'm doing a little sway, which I couldn't tell. It's like a little circular sway, and they would say, "You are you are really swaying," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And if I stood there still and didn't speak, I could feel it. But if I'm just standing there, I had a wide base with my feet because my balance was off, and I did not realize I was doing that. So when they informed me of that, I tried it without talking and just being real still, and I could see that they were truthful about what they were saying. So there was that issue, and so I ended up being on light duty, working in a little nursing office, answering phones, answering call lights, and so I was stationed at the phone, and I would have one of the CNAs that came in. I didn't have, but she would come in, and if she was sitting in the chair that I was supposed to be sitting in, because I had severe back pain and I had to sit there, that was my job, to answer the phones. So I had to have a seat to sit in. And she'd be in the seat, and I'd say, "Hey, I need to sit there because my job is to answer the phones." And she would make some smart aleck comment about this chair, or "You've just got to have this chair." Well, I had to have the chair because it's over there where I'm supposed to be sitting. So at one point, they put me downstairs in a big office where I was to help test and record COVID testing, the results for the employees. So my job was to enter the test results into a spreadsheet on the computer. Now, I had vision issues. I had extreme light sensitivity. I had headaches like crazy. I had nausea. I had vertigo. But I had to stare at this computer screen that had red, orange, and yellow bright colors that were on this like an Excel spreadsheet where different categories were different colors. And I was in such pain, I could hardly look at it. And I would be in tears, and I would try to explain to them, and they said, "Well, the doctor said you could work light duty, and this is light duty." They did not care. And so I struggled through that, but I was in tears so much. And so I started hearing little whisperings about me. And, there were people that were saying, you only bumped your head. We don't understand. Well, I bumped my head, but I hit it with such force. When you're on a wet floor, when you slip on a wet floor, it creates momentum. If you're walking fast, and again, I don't recall going in the room or the act of slipping. I just remember going towards the room, and then all of a sudden everything's dark and sparkles, and I spilled medication, and it's slow motion. It felt like slow motion. So anyway, I had people saying things behind my back, and then they started spreading rumors that I really wasn't injured, and that I would have to call out, or I would have to leave early because I would be in excruciating pain. So anyway, I went to physical therapy. I had 3 or 4 different rounds of physical therapy, and I had speech therapy because I had some issues, and I kept asking about my vision because my vision was messed up. I noticed things. I even went to my eye doctor, and he wrote out a report or a letter to workers' comp doctors, or to workers' comp insurance. And he gave his opinion of what had happened and suggested vision therapy. Well, I kept requesting that, and I finally got sent to someone in Memphis, Tennessee, which is 3 hours away. So, me with vision issues having to drive 3 hours. So I had a friend that took me, and that particular doctor was just not very nice, no bedside manner. And I ended up with a stomach bug on the way there. So I was, throwing up in his office like terrible, several times, terribly. And so he even made a comment that I probably needed to go to the ER, and I agreed, but I didn't. I wasn't going to go to the ER in Memphis. Come on. So when he was examining me, he had made the comment, "It's not your eyes, it's your brain," which I knew. The brain was having a hard time understanding what my eyes were seeing. It just couldn't comprehend sometimes. And then it would get tired after I'd be struggling, and then I'd have more difficulty. So he did not, he referenced having vision therapy, but I found out a few years later when I was seeing a new neurologist. I'll get to that in a minute. The new neurologist, had prescribed vision therapy, ordered vision therapy. But as time went on, it never happened. So I would talk to my work comp attorney, and she finally said, when she found out, she said, nobody ever attributed it to the brain injury, to the vision issues, to the brain injury. And so the new neurologist, see if he will do that. So sure enough, when I mentioned it to him, he put that it was greater than 51%, connected to the brain injury. So at that point, then I could finally go to get set up with vision therapy. So that was three and a half years later. So when I was back at that neurologist in Memphis, I came home and I didn't know I didn't know that he needed to put that it was related to the brain injury so that I could then start vision therapy. So if they don't tell you, workers' comp won't tell you, you just have to figure it out on your own. So all the things I wrote in my journal and all the things I learned, I had to start advocating for myself. I would see the vestibular therapist, I would see the physical therapist, the speech therapist, and I would let them all know these issues I'm having. And, they're not the ones that would have to order things. They would record it, I'm sure, I would think, in their records, in my records, but they were not the ones that were allowed to order vision therapy or other therapies. So they could only recommend that I would need PT a little longer than what, they originally thought. So time goes by and I'm still with workers' comp. I'm still trying to heal. I've had no treatment for my spine. They would look at the CT scans, the MRIs, the x-rays, and say everything's fine. So meanwhile, I was fired wrongfully from that job 6 months after my injuries. And then I opened my own business as an IV hydration nurse. I was in the process of doing that before I fell. I had to recover, but I went ahead and opened it because I knew something was coming down the pike with regards to my job. I could see the writing on the wall. So I ended up, I was in such pain. I went to the ortho again. And actually, I wasn't going to go for another visit to the orthopedic surgeon. And my work comp attorney said, just go to him. I said, he's not going to do anything. He keeps denying that there's any problem. And she said, you'll have a record of it. So I went back. He came in. He said something like, I've already told you everything's fine. So with 5 minutes, not even a 5-minute visit, he walks out. And I said, so this is what they pay you for, 5 minutes. And he kept walking. So when I had some flare-ups again about a year later, my attorney wanted me to go see him. And so apparently she checked with him and the neurologist, or maybe she checked with the work comp attorney or adjuster, because then she emailed me back and said those two doctors decided they weren't going to see me again. And I think it's because I called them out on their crap. I'm not stupid. I'm not the most brilliant person, I'm sure, but I'm not stupid. I could see what was going on with how they were not wanting to admit that things were wrong. So as of that point, I think I only had been diagnosed with headaches, maybe pain from the ortho, and then the neurologist, just headaches. So then the headaches started to ease up. So they're like, okay, you're fine. No more. We don't need to see you anymore. So I kept pressing the issue. I kept talking to my attorney. We tried another neurologist. And so let me go back to, there was a physiatrist, and that's a weird name, but he's a physiatrist. So he dealt with physical pain and like the entire body system and pain management. So almost like a pain clinic. Well, they set me up with him, and he was an hour and a half away, and it was by interstate. And that was a very difficult thing for me to drive, just with the vision issues. So I'd go out there with a friend. It was tough, but he had also tried to say, everything's fine, you're fine. And he said he had made a mention about doing like an EEG on my arms, because I still have pins and needles going down each side, and my legs, but it's primarily more intense on the left side. So he had done that testing, said, oh, everything's fine. And then he also had recorded, like when I fell, I did not hit the occiput back here. I hit the parietal lobe portion of my head. So it damaged the parietal lobe of the brain. But he put in his notes that I told him I fell to my left side and then I bounced to my back. I don't know how that happens. And when I saw that on the notes from the first visit, I corrected him when I went to the second visit. But I did not like him. And I know he had me, I guess he was just, we had to fill out an opioid risk survey, because apparently it was like a pain clinic, and I don't take narcotics. So apparently, because I have family that have been alcoholics or used drugs, I was at a moderate risk for opiate use, for narcotic use. And I said, at this age, there's no way I'm going to go that route. And I said, that needs to be changed, because there is no risk on my part whatsoever. And he's like, well, we have to fill that out. So I was already labeled as a moderate risk for narcotic use. And I would refuse narcotics when they'd offer to write the prescription. They didn't get that, but yet now they're trying to label me as that. So it's kind of like a two-edged sword. So then he had, I was referred to neuropsych eval, a neurological psychological eval. And that day I went in for that in Nashville was a rainy, cold day, and I had the worst headache, and I couldn't see straight. The lights were bright. So he had recorded that I had no problem with anything, and multitasked well. I never multitasked. I did one task at a time, and I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but he's part of that club. So then I also mentioned to him that I did not trust the physiatrist. So he put that in his report. That got to the physiatrist, and they called me and said, he's no longer going to see you because you don't trust him. Yay! I'm excited because I didn't like the guy at all. So then I went to another neurologist with my own insurance, and this neurologist was recommended to me by my attorney. And so I went to him, still not, believing that anything would come of it. And so I needed the diagnosis for the fractured spine for my case, because if it was fractured from the fall, it needed to be included, regardless of whether they could do anything for it. So I go to this doctor, and he had requested all of my prior notes, I guess the last visit notes from each doctor I went to prior. So of course, I bring those, and then he looks at them, and he comes in and he said, I want to refer you to a physiatrist. He's a great doctor. That doctor I had already gone to, who discharged me because I didn't trust him. And I said, no, he's horrible. He said, oh, he's a great doctor. He's a good friend of mine. And I thought, here we go. He's not going to diagnose this because he's a good friend of his, and he didn't diagnose it. So it's a good old boys club. So sure enough, he tried to tell me that he noted the separation of the tip of the spinous process, one in particular that's obvious. So he noted it, but he said, I really think it was a congenital deformity. I have spoken to multiple orthos who don't want to get involved in chiropractors, and they're like, there's no way that's congenital, a deformity. There's no way, it's a fracture. So I end up getting a referral to a pain clinic for injections into my neck and shoulder and back to see if that would help with the pain. So when I went to that pain clinic in town here, when she uploaded her notes to my chart, I got a notification, an email. So I checked in, I logged in, I saw the notes, I started reading, and down in the note, she had written or typed It was kind of almost verbatim to this, except I'm not going to say the doctor's name. Dr. So-and-so tells me today that he told her there's no fracture because Dr. So-and-so is a friend of his and he didn't want to get him in trouble. And I'm like, my mouth dropped and I just was shocked. So I filed a complaint against that doctor with the medical board in Nashville and filed a complaint with my insurance because I paid my copay. So it ends up, when I went back to the pain clinic, she said, I wish you'd have said something to me because I typed what you said at your visit. And I said, I never said that. I never said that quote. And she said, but I typed what you say. And I said, I never said that. So she said, I'm going to owe him a big apology email. And so here we go. It's like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. So she was also, they don't want to get anybody in trouble. So she ends up changing it in my chart. And I had already snapshotted it. So I have a copy of it because I filed a complaint. So I printed off a copy. So I saved it. And anyway, nothing came of the complaint because that's how it is. So there's that discrepancy. So then my attorney recommended an ortho that I go to because he looked at the CT scan. He told her he noted the chips or the fracture and it should have healed a long time ago. So then he decides he wants to see me for an independent medical exam and he requests my file, my chart. She sends all that. So I'm excited because I think, okay, he noted the chips. He admitted to her, he saw them. They should have healed a long time ago. So there's an admission. So I go and I'm happy that finally somebody's gonna call it like it is. So I'm sitting there for less than 5 minutes and he looked at me and said, it's all in your head. And I must have gave him a look because he said, I'm on your side. And I guess I'm just staring at him like in shock. And he also said, it's artifact. Well, no, it's not. He initially admitted it, but he gets my chart. He sees that workers' comp, his buddies, his ortho and neuro buddies say, oh, she's fine. So he changed his story. You don't need other doctors' reports to look at a CT scan to make a diagnosis. You don't need your friends' opinions to make a diagnosis. And so he ends up, when I said even the vision issues, he goes, all in your head. I have diagnoses from a vision specialist that go way and above his training for vision issues and brain issues. He's ortho. But he tried to tell me the pins and needles, it's all in your head. You're fixated on it. Everything is in your head. And, I wish I don't usually think really quickly and say mean things, but I really wish I'd have said something to him. I didn't, but he will never get a good review from me. So this guy was independent, but I even said to him, he said, so you think everybody's lying? So he's trying to gaslight me. And I said, they give the least damaging diagnosis because workers' comp will not pay them, will not send people to them anymore if they give a diagnosis that's costly. And he said, I know, I used to see patients for them. I know exactly what they do. So he knew, but he was protecting his friends. Why would he say initially, oh, I'm mad. Why would he say he noted the chips, they should have healed a long time ago, but then he turns around and says, oh, no, it's all in your head. It's artifact. So, and I'm sorry, this video is going on and on, so you may want to watch it in two different sittings. But anyway, that was his opinion. So this will come out of whatever settlement I get, the payment for him. So that was a waste of money. It was $2,500 that will come out. That is a waste of money. It is a crock. It's a scam. So recently, a friend of mine, well, let me go back to my new neurologist. So my attorney set me up with a neurologist and said, I hear he's good with employees. And I rolled my eyes and I said, fine. So when I went to see that doctor, I told him, I said, I've already been dismissed by several work comp doctors. And I said, if you're going to do that, do it now and I'll leave because I cannot go through this again. And he made a joke and said, so get it over with, right? And I said, yeah. Well, from that point on, everything was good. Now, prior to that, I'd had a diagnosis of headaches and then a very faint diagnosis of pain somewhere with the ortho, the first ortho. So when I left this neurologist's office, I had 16 diagnoses. Now, where did those come from? And I asked him, why were you truthful and all the other doctors were not? And he just went like this: it's a money thing. It's just a money game. And he said workers' comp does not like him. So eventually, I showed him the CT scan and I said, you and I both know this is fractured. And he nodded. And I said, why can't you diagnose it? And he said it needs to be an ortho or a radiologist. So fast forward, well, let's stay there. So he recommended vision therapy, and he eventually had to state that it was more probable than not that I sustained the brain injury, the vision issues as a result of the brain injury from the fall. So we got that. We got the order for vision therapy. They approved it. Workers' comp approved it. So I found a vision therapist because they were trying to send me to these faraway places, beyond an hour away, 2-3 hours back to Memphis. And I said no. So I found one in Nashville and they agreed to see me. So we submitted that and they approved it. So I go to this doctor and I leave there with, I can't tell you how many diagnoses of vision that he saw. He said, I see every one of these issues. The testing, I see it visually. They're not going to like it, but these are what I see. And he said, workers' comp does not like him. And I was like, well, he's going to be good because they don't like him, just like the new neurologist. So fast forward to, I ended up getting prism glasses. I ended up getting vision therapy weekly. So I've been doing that since September. Now, mind you, that was 3.5 years after the injuries. So I don't know if they're going to get better. It's been so long, I don't know. And I've been so frustrated. So the other day, last weekend, I was at a grocery store in town and I saw a nurse I used to work with. So she was asking how things were going. I had a flare up back in February, so I had another CT scan, and the artifact, let me say, artifact, a lot of times is if there's movement during an imaging, like MRI, CT, X-ray, and that movement might have a blur, and they call that artifact. So everywhere there were suspected fractures on several spinous processes, the ortho that said it's all in my head said it's artifact. So when I had the new CT scan, it wasn't my idea. The ER doctor had said, we could do, if you want one, we could do one. And I said, that's not my call, that's yours. Because I couldn't make the call because workers' comp would deny it. So it had to be the doctor's opinion or advice or recommendation. So he said, okay, we'll do one. So that CT scan is identical but more clear than the one 4 years ago. And the supposed artifact, air quotes, is in the exact same spots. Now that artifact does not show up in the exact same spots all the time. So there's the first clue that it was all a lie that they've said. So this friend of mine, this nurse friend of mine, I'm telling her about that and I showed her the image and she said, you know what? I work at such and such place in Nashville and I work with orthopedic surgeons. Why don't you send that to me and I'll show it to one of them? And I was like, hallelujah. Okay. So I sent it to her. She showed them. She messaged me back and said, the one she spoke to said, before she told him I had a backwards fall, he said she fell backwards, didn't she? I can tell by the CT scan. And so he saw something that indicated I fell backwards. So then he tells her it's definitely fractured. He doesn't know why it wouldn't have healed in 4 years. Maybe there was calcification or some ligamentous damage or something. And so, but he said it's definitely fractured. There's nothing that they'd be able to do, but it's definitely fractured. So I have an appointment coming up. I'm not going to give any specifics about that. And they have approved, it's going to go with my insurance. I'm not even, they don't know about workers' comp. They will eventually, but I'm not trying to hide anything. But until they give me a diagnosis, they don't need to know what these other opinions were in order to look at that and make a diagnosis. So he's not going to have my workers' comp reports because that's going to sway his thinking. He's already admitted, just like that recent ortho that said it was all in my head. Initially, he told my attorney that he noted the chips, they should have healed a long time ago. The new ortho that I'm seeing tomorrow, well, it is tomorrow, he said the same thing. He said, I should have healed. I don't know why I didn't heal in 4 years, but definitely fractured. So we're going to get that looked at and maybe I'll get a diagnosis. But I have fought these people for so long, workers' comp for so long. They have denied. Just last year, I got approval for coverage for a specific type of therapy on my neck, which has helped the spasms and the pain. I still get the swelling, not as bad, but I still get it. And when I do, this whole entire side of my face is in pain. I have a bad headache, the ear hurts, the arm hurts, I have weakness down my arm. So anyway, all of the things that they have denied, just last year they approved that. I had been going for months and months and months and put out a lot of money for that. I also had been going to chiropractic for a couple years because they wouldn't cover it. So last year they decided to cover it. So if I was faking all of this, why was I spending my money that insurance didn't cover for these visits for chiropractor for 2 years? Probably $8,000 I spent from the settlement from the wrongful termination. So thankfully I had that. So they last year they decided to cover the neck therapy, cover the chiropractic, cover vision therapy, cover counseling, because I'd requested that for 4 years. So we got all that started, and so we've made progress, but it's because I have had to advocate for myself. So what I wanted to get at with this video, not just to say, woe is me, I have all these issues. The average person would have probably stopped when they first said no. I'm a little stubborn, and I'm also a nurse, and I know things. I'm not stupid. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not stupid. So because I pursued and persisted and researched, I'm having to advocate for myself. So I became armed with information to present to my attorney, for her to present to the carrier, the insurance carrier, and get approval for things. But I also am meticulous because I forget things after the brain injury, I have to write things down. So I'm meticulous if I research, I write things down and I email my attorney. So my suggestion is, if you're going through this, write everything down. Daily, I kept a journal daily for a couple of years, 3 years, I think. And that helped me during the wrongful termination lawsuit, because I had information in my journal, in my writings about stuff. And but I also had information in there about stuff relating to the work injury. So write things down and advocate for yourself. If you're not satisfied with what workers' comp, with their answer of, oh, you're fine. No, you couldn't possibly, you couldn't possibly have a fractured spine. You're focused on it. You're too fixated on it. It's all in your head. It's just artifact. That's bullcrap. Fight for yourself, because I have to live with this the rest of my life. It hurts my back, my spine. There's bone on the spinous processes. There's 3, one laying on one, which is laying on another one below it. So that hurts when I walk. Not all the time, but 95% of the time, I feel the vibration of that. When I'm in the car and I hit bumps, or I'm on a bumpy road or speed bumps, I feel it. When I'm walking from the store to my car, or car to the store, or wherever, I feel it. I used to race walk a long time ago. I can't get out and do that. I can't walk. I can't exercise because I feel it. And so, whether they can do anything or not, it needs to be noted in my chart for workers' comp, because these were injuries from the fall. And so I'm not letting it die, because, this is going to have to be reflected in whatever impairment rating, settlement, diagnoses for the settlement because this happened. And it happened as a result of the fall. I'm not letting it go by the wayside. This case will be open until we get to that point. You know, if I'd have been just an average person and I did not do the research and I did not fight for myself, I'd be, you know, this would be over, and I would be living with this and having to pay for it myself. So just write things down, record things, research, fight for yourself. If you have any questions, please put them below in the comments. You know, I would love to help people to know what to do and how to do it and how to navigate this whole mess, because workers' comp is not on your side. They say they are, but they're not. When I was watching videos and learning about this, a couple of different attorneys I watched that were for the employee had spoken to, they had connections to former insurance adjusters for workers' comp. And so they both said, both of these insurance adjusters did not work there anymore, but they said that they would celebrate which of the adjusters saved the most money by closing the claims as early as they could before anything came up that the employee could say, oh, I'm hurting, now I've got this issue. They got to ring the bell, have big get-togethers, big promotions for being the one to save the insurance carrier the most money. And so these were firsthand accounts from former adjusters who said, this is not about healing the employee. It is about the insurance carrier saving as much money as possible, because the claims can get expensive, and their job was to keep the costs low. And the doctors that they send you to, these are all their doctors. You get to pick from the panel of 3 of their doctors, but you can pick. You chose it. But they're all in each other's back pocket, you know. So do your research. I'll try to end this video real soon. Thank you if you've lasted this long and watched it this far. I appreciate that. So I just want people to be armed. I had to research this and learn it all by myself. I did find one video. I can't remember what her name is, but she won. She was a NASA scientist, and she won her case against whatever issues there were with her health and her employer. And she was brilliant, a brilliant scientist. So I learned a lot from her. I wish I could remember her channel name, but I can't. But please do your research. Take care of yourself. Advocate for yourself. If you need to find a nurse advocate or somebody that can help you, you know, please do, because it's worth it's been a struggle. It's worth it, but it has been a struggle. I would not have the prism glasses. I would not have the vision therapy. I wouldn't have the new neurologist or the, vision specialist, the neck therapy, the chiropractic. These are all things that I need that help. And my back is killing me right now, sitting on a stool. And these are things that I need to get better that they denied for so long. So it's about time. But it's all because of perseverance and me advocating for myself. Nobody else did. Nobody else would. And I just kept at it and kept at it. And it's exhausting. I'm exhausted. I want to be done with it, but I'm not. They're seeing that they can't just write me off like that. So please do your research. Please record everything. Even if it's insignificant, it might not be insignificant. It might be something you need to use down the road in a trying to advocate for yourself. If you have evidence or this is what happened, just write it down no matter the significance of it. And then please leave comments below. Let me know your story. If you've been in this, what you did, how you made it out. Were you successful in your settlement, or did they cover things for you? I've heard horror stories, and I don't want to be one of those horror stories. I had an accident taking care of patients for this business, this facility, to keep them in business, to keep that patient safe, and renting that room, living there. And all they could do for me was say, no, you're fine. You're fine. So fight for yourself, fight, and make sure you get what you need. So do your best. Let me know if I can help you at all. And until the next video, now please share this video. Let others know, people you may know that have been in some kind of work accident. And I hope you like, share, and subscribe, and then I will see you on the next video.